Octavia looks like a class above the rest of the cars on the same platform, and at first many even mistook it for a converted fifth-generation Passat. Thanks to the long rear overhang and the large step on the fifth door, the Octavia hatchback really looks like a more solid sedan, although it is 16 centimeters shorter than the Passat. But this is not the main thing. The roomy hatchback turned out to be good not only as a family car, but also as a driver's car. After a comparative test with the Passat, experts unanimously assured that it was more interesting to drive a Škoda. Since then, by automotive standards, an era has passed. A restyling of the successor, already the second Octavia, was recently carried out. But it is curious that at the same time the first Octavia, to the name of which the word tour was added in 2004, remains the leader in sales in the model range of the brand. Of course, thanks in large part to the price. Only official dealers in Russia sold about 70,000 of these cars, and this is not counting the second-hand from Europe. Does Škoda Octavia retain its best qualities over time? And who should be preferred when choosing a used copy? A more fresh Škoda Octavia or a close relative on the German platform A4/PQ34, the fourth Golf? The main consumer difference between Octavia and Golf is, without exaggeration, a huge trunk, 528 liters, almost 150 liters more than that of Volkswagen. For station wagons, this difference is smaller, but it is also impressive, 548 and 460 liters, and with the rear seat folded down, 1512 and 1460 liters, respectively. The main disadvantage of the Octavia salons, both the hatchback and the station wagon, is the tightness in the gallery. And the interior of Octavia is simpler. In the motley company of platformers, it is Octavia, and not Volkswagen, that is assigned the role of a truly people's car. Finishing materials, although cheaper, but the build quality is at its best. Crickets can only settle behind the door trim and behind the back of the rear sofa. Over time, the plastic of the door handles and the instrument panel fades, both the old one and the updated one, which appeared in 1999, first on expensive versions, and a year later, in the database. In German, hard, but comfortable front seats do not sit out. The fabric of the upholstery and inserts on the doors is durable, but it loses its neat appearance over time. It weakly repels dirt and becomes greasy. A characteristic feature of Volkswagen bodies, high corrosion resistance, is fully inherent in Octavia. Galvanized on both sides, the panels rust only after garage repair, chips do not bloom, and only the axles of the wiper leashes and door locks suffer from salt. Electric windows do not fail in winter either. With persistent attempts to lower the glass frozen to the seals, the plastic guides crack and the windows warp. At first, Octavia was plagued by other problems with glazing. Before the body was strengthened during the restyling of 2000, its lack of rigidity led to cracks on the windshields. The rear ones shattered into pieces. Everything changed under warranty. All engines, with the exception of the extremely rare Czech 60 horsepower 1.4-liter lower engine that was not officially supplied to us, went to Octavia as a dowry from the Volkswagen concern. The old 1,600 cubic centimeters 8-valve, most often found on cars of the budget version of the LX Classic, older than 2004, traces its lineage back to the early 90s. 75 old horses, at the very least, are enough to drive around the city, but on the highway the motor is no longer a fighter. Fortunately, another all-Volkswagen 8-valve of the same volume with a large cylinder diameter, 81.0 millimeters instead of 76.5 millimeters, was also installed on the Octavia, but, depending on the year of manufacture, it produces 100 horsepower, or 101 horsepower. This engine with an aluminum block and a higher compression ratio suits the Octavia much better, and although the gear ratios of the transmission are selected individually for each of the engines, the newer unit pulls a loaded car noticeably more cheerfully. But the Octavia's 150 horsepower turbocharged 1.8-liter engine is enough for the eyes. This 4-cylinder, 20-valve engine also revitalizes the larger cars of the concern, and the Octavia is also the most affordable car, under the hood of which you can find such an engine. The turbocharger on the Octavia, as on the Golf, is much more durable than on the Passat or Audi cars, where the same engine is installed longitudinally. Here the turbine is really an Achilles heel, as it often fails due to oil starvation caused by overheating and coking of the oil supply pipe located next to the hot exhaust manifold. And on the Octavia, close to the collector, there is not a pressure pipe, but a drain pipe. It clogs with deposits much less often, and then only when using low-quality oil or when it is not replaced in time. The only danger is that those who love to ride in tightness, the stem of the boost pressure control valve can turn sour in the open position. With a competent attitude towards themselves, the units often live up to 300,000 kilometers. Experienced mechanics advise only to avoid cars with chip engines, and special attention to the toothed belt. This brake leads not only to the inevitable meeting of the pistons with the valves, but also to the break of the latter. And broken valves can completely defeat the engine. The atmospheric 125 horsepower version of the same 1.8-liter engine is rare in the secondary market. Even rarer, which replaced it in 2001, an easier-to-manufacture 2-liter 8-valve with 116 horsepower. This engine was initially distinguished by increased oil consumption, up to half a liter per 1,000 kilometers, but in 2002, after a revision of the crankcase ventilation design, the problem was solved. Rare guests on the market in diesels, and of the 1.9-liter engines we offered with the Bosch EDC electronic fuel pump, we would prefer 110 or 90 horsepower turbocharged versions. 68 horsepower atmospheric for Octavia is not enough. Although in terms of reliability, all these diesel engines are among the best in their class. However, none of the motors has global problems, and small dirty tricks can be expected from low-current electrical equipment, sensitive to the state of contacts and connectors. Moisture, having got into the block of the lambda probe located below, distorts its signal. At the same time, it is impossible to identify the error of the control system on your own. Without a scanner, you will have to go to the service. It happens that the lambda probe itself fails, as well as the coolant temperature sensor. The likelihood of premature death of the airflow meter increases if you forget about replacing the air filter. And individual ignition coils in 20-valve engines are sensitive to the condition of the candles. But the cylinder piston group does not present surprises. On gasoline engines it can last more than 200,000 kilometers, and on diesel engines, 1.5 to 2 times longer. The gas distribution mechanism for all engines is driven by a belt that changes along with the rollers. You should not forget about its timely replacement. In the event of a break, the valves will inevitably meet with the pistons on any of the motors. When you replace it again, the water pump also changes along with the belt, and the camshaft seals usually last the same period. Most of the suspension, steering and transmission components of the Octavia are identical to those on the Golf. Owners of German cars take advantage of this. The quality of Škoda parts is no worse, and you can save up to 15% on the price. Since 1999, cars for the Russian market have been equipped with a bad road package, which includes a reinforced suspension with a ground clearance increased to 170 mm, engine crankcase protection and a plastic engine compartment mudguard. At the same time, the resource of shock absorbers has increased to 120 to 150,000 kilometers, while in the European suspension they may require replacement even after 100,000 kilometers. Stabilizer bushings give up much earlier on bad roads. Supports of the front struts and front wheel bearings live from 60 to 100,000 kilometers. The rear silent block of the front suspension arm walks 60 to 80,000 kilometers, the same number of bushings of 4 transverse and 2 trailing arms of an independent rear suspension on all-wheel drive versions. The usual semi-dependent beam on front-wheel drive vehicles does not cause any trouble. More than 100,000 go replaceable ball joints, steering tips and stabilizer struts separately from the levers on conventional versions. On all-wheel drive, 1.5 times less. Knocking in the steering mechanism may require its replacement after 120,000 kilometers, but the issue price for a European car is not so high, from $600. Sources of extraneous sounds in the steering can also be splines and cardan connections of the column, requiring prompt intervention only in the event of a noticeable backlash. In general, if the suspension and steering elements that have exhausted their resources are changed in time, the Škoda Octavia will retain its light and docile nature. Transmission problems are extremely rare. The 5-speed mechanics, the only option for cars with a 75 horsepower gasoline engine and an atmospheric diesel engine, are filled with oil for the entire service life. And yet, after 100 to 150,000 kilometers, it does not hurt to update it. Otherwise, easy maintenance comes down to adjusting drive cables on turbo versions and rods on atmospheric ones. This is usually required in the second 100,000 kilometers, when gear shifting begins to cause difficulties. For cars with turbo engines, the clutch comes with a 2-mass flywheel with a torsional vibration damper. which is why it costs a lot, $470 to $550. The resource of the driven disc is 100 to 120,000 kilometers, and by the same time, the destruction of the damper springs of the flywheel is possible. Sign: crackling when starting, as from a faulty hinge of equal angular velocities. On atmospheric versions, the clutch lasts up to 200,000 kilometers and costs half as much. There are no sins behind the 4-speed automatic with electronic control. With the timely, once every 60,000 kilometers, oil change, it can fail except from illiterate operation. An all-wheel drive transmission with an electronically controlled Haldex clutch, which is clamped when the front wheels slip, appeared in the fall of 1999, first on Octavia with a station wagon and a 90-horsepower turbo diesel, and in 2001, on hatchbacks with a 1.8T engine. A similar scheme is used on the Octavia co-platforms with the transverse engine, Volkswagen Golf 4Motion and Audi TT. The clutch is reliable, but requires attention. Oil change every 30,000 kilometers, every other time, along with the filter. However, this work is within the power of any mechanic, and a special transmission for the clutch is always on sale. The braking system of Octavia, as well as the Golf, was not spared by the proprietary disease of VAG cars, corrosion of aluminum sealing rings at the junctions of brake lines and hoses. In order not to be left without brakes, it is better to change the rings at every opportunity, for example, every 2 years when updating the brake fluid. Other elements of the brakes are durable. The front discs last up to 100,000 kilometers. The pads are enough for 30 to 40,000. In the rear drum mechanisms of cars with 1.4-liter and 1.6-liter engines, the pads can last more than 100,000 kilometers. In the secondary market, 3- and 5-year-old Octavias are most often found with 1,600 cubic centimeters 8-valve 75 horsepower and 101 horsepower, 38% and 18% of the proposed machines, respectively. The most affordable Octavias are with 75 horsepower 1.4-liter engines, about 7% of sales. It is curious that automatic transmission, 15% of cars on the market, and station wagon, 12%, do not have a serious impact on the price.